recently when you moved to the Origin. How quickly you made friends there too. How it went from being your prison, which yes, is what it feels like when you no longer have your driver's license, to it being your sport hotel. I remember how we laughed when you first said that. Ed, I admire you, the incredible life you created, your continued interest to learn well into your 80s, all your sayings and quotes, your truly caring, helpful personality, the stories you tell, remembering a place you've been, a place you've flown to 40, 50 years ago, and being able to describe it in detail. Ed, I miss you. We all miss you. Every single person that had the honor of knowing you. Your friend.
3 summers ago, Therese asked her dad if he'd like to take one more trip back home to Austria. He declined, and Therese said, "No problem, but if you want to go, just let me know." Every once in a while, she'd check in to see if he was interested, knowing that she'd need to prepare well in advance for a trip like that. One Thursday in August, she asked again, and this time Ed said, yes, he thought it might be a good idea. "Great," said Therese, "when would you like to go?" Her mind raced ahead to September, and she figured they could pull it off. "Monday," he replied. And that was it. Therese, Morgan, and Ed were on a plane to Europe on Monday evening. The family welcomed them with open arms, and the stories flowed. A couple of weeks ago, at the church in Middleburg, a funeral mass was held for Ed. Afterward, an entirely full church walked over to his nephew's hotel and hung out there, reminiscing and remembering their hometown boy. Ed's cousin Dorothea sent this message. "He was there for us and had a way of making you feel that everything was okay. For me as a child and later as a teenager, his experiences always included the breath of the big wide world and always triggered the yearning to leave the confines of our valley. It's nice for me to read that Edward had a fulfilling life, certainly a loving family and wonderful friends." And now, I'd like to invite Ed's family to share some of their stories and thoughts. I'd like to start, I think I'm going to start with Monika.
Hi everyone, I'm Monika, and I was fortunate enough to be Ed's granddaughter for almost 17 years. During that time, I learned a lot about my Opa. Not only was he a pilot, a mechanic, and a ski guide, but he was an amazing father and husband before he even became a grandfather too. He had qualities that very few people I've ever met in my life possess. When my parents and I traveled to his hometown in Klein-Walsenthal, I saw him show up with various family members that he hadn't seen in years. Yet somehow, he made it seem like he had never known him. Opa made me feel the same way, as we didn't get to see each other very often, but he still made the time to listen and ask what was new with me all the time. I especially loved talking to Opa during the ski season, because he shared the same love for skiing in the mountains as I do. He was one of the few family members I have that really understood how exhilarating skiing on a powder day is. Those conversations about skiing and the other things that I shared with my Opa made him not only my grandfather, but my friend. As many of you know, around 2 years ago, Opa was admitted to a hospital in Calgary, and we were all scared that we might lose him. Thankfully, Opa pulled through, and we got another 2 years to spend with him. And while I was close to Opa before, I became even closer to him after he got sick, because I felt even luckier to have him in my life for a moment. I believe that being related to Opa was an honor, because of all the things he accomplished in his life, and all of the inspiring things he did for his friends and family. And now that I'm old enough to understand all of the amazing things that Opa did, I am more than grateful to you all.
Thank you, Monika. Morgan.
Hi everyone, thank you all for being here today. It's a privilege to share the great memories we've all had with my Opa. I'll be speaking on behalf of myself and my brother Alex. And he might be my backup if I can't do this. We were very fortunate to have grown up within biking distance of our grandparents and get to see our Opa every day. As many of you know, Opa was my best friend and we have always had a very special bond. I was his schneckle, and we always shared in very special moments. He instilled in me from an early age a love of playing in the mountains and eating stinky cheese. We shared these common loves my entire life, and in Opa's later years, when he was unable to get into the mountains the way he used to, he took great joy living vicariously through me and hearing my stories and pictures when I came home. Our special joke was that any time I was about to leave for a trip, he would say, "Don't do anything I wouldn't do," which, as many of you can imagine, that leaves it wide open for me. Another classic one-liner of his came whenever I was heading to ski train on the glacier, and all he would say to me is, "Don't fall in a crevasse." This was with a friend of my mind a few weeks ago when I was up coaching on the glacier a few weeks after Opa had passed. He's always with me in spirit. Alex also shared a very special bond with Opa over their shared love of building and tinkering. These two enjoyed taking apart and building things as much as they enjoyed using the final product. A few of their greatest hits include our backyard treehouse, several beautiful birdhouses, and for the one time I was able to join in on the action, our high school Rube Goldberg project. Opa's garage was better known as Opa and Alex's workshop, with the two of them always having something on the go in there. One of Alex's favorite memories of Opa is the time Alex went to his house and said, "Opa, can you raise the seat on my bike?" Opa's response was classic. "I can take a helicopter apart with a pocket knife and put it back together. You think I can raise your bike seat?" My most cherished memory of Opa was the trip that he, my mom, and I took to Europe 3 years ago. It was a trip where I was finally old enough to take in all the special stories of Opa's childhood and be able to place them and where they happened. As well, he sent me on many beautiful mountain runs and we were always able to meet at the top. My highlight of that trip was when I climbed the Winterstein, the tallest mountain in his home valley in Austria, because Opa was so proud of me. I will always remember that. While we have many amazing memories of Opa, as he has been with us every day for our entire lives, what I will miss the most are some of the smaller, intangible daily interactions that cannot be replaced. Our daily suppers together, him in his spot, me and mine right beside him, driving Opa around town, and always getting a comment on our driving, like, "Don't brake too hard, you're making my head jiggle." Eating ourselves sick on Käse Spätzle every birthday and Christmas, explaining to him what I was doing in school, the funny faces he would make for us when he was getting an insulin shot, and the daily lessons on anything from remembering to push my chair in after supper to how to be a kind and welcoming friend to everyone we meet. I could go on all day about how much he meant to me, but for today, I hope this gives you a picture of how much of a presence he was in all our lives and how difficult it will be moving forward and adjusting to our smaller family. Thank you.
My name is Teresa, and I'm privileged to be Ed's daughter. As you've heard, my family and I live here in Canmore, close to where my mom and dad retired. After our mother died in 2011, my relationship with my dad evolved. I was no longer just his daughter, who he looked after and supported. I was now also his support and looked after him. And while there were tough days and tough conversations, it was also a gift. He joined our family for dinner almost every night, unless he was out with friends. We have some incredible memories from around that dinner table. Dad would sometimes call during the day to say, "I have to talk to you sometimes." We never quite knew what was coming. It could be, "I have to talk to you. You drove a bit too fast this afternoon when we went to Calgary." Or in the very same tone of voice, "I have to talk to you. You should know I have cancer." He didn't believe in letting things get him down, even something as serious as his cancer. Many people didn't even know he was sick. It just wasn't something he talked about. We spent much time together these past years attending oncologist appointments in Calgary. The drives were always special because it was a time just the two of us were together and could talk about anything. And the drives were special because he made them positive experiences, despite the very grim reason we were actually going in the first place. I can't count the number of times his oncologist would raise his arms in the air and say, "Ed, I can't explain this. With the amount of cancer you have, you should be very sick, if still here at all. Keep doing what you're doing. You're amazing." And what he was doing was what he had always done. Approach the situation as the cards he had been dealt, and then move on with a positive attitude. Not let it get him down or stop him from doing things. When he couldn't do things the way he always had, he found a new way. After a fall and a subsequent brain bleed 2 years ago, he lost his driver's license. He was convinced the doctor and I were in cahoots together, but whatever. He adjusted, and we found a new way for him to be independent. Like my dad's stories, my story is going to weave a bit here to a family trip to Austria in 2012. His childhood friend Helmut suggested we go for a bike ride. Great idea, we thought. And given that my dad could always do anything he set his mind to, it never occurred to me that he hadn't actually ridden a bike in probably 50 years. Helmut and Dad had e-bikes, and the rest of us pedaled towards a small valley 10 or so kilometers away. And then it started. His balance wasn't what it used to be, and he fell. Now thankfully, Chris is always prepared, and he had a first aid kit along. So he patched my dad up, and back on the bike he went, until he tipped over again. More patching, a bit more riding, and a bit more falling. I couldn't watch, it was brutal. But my dad was stubborn, and he was going to get to that valley no matter how many times he fell. By the time we arrived, Chris had depleted the Band-Aid supply and had moved on to patching him up with the duct tape that Ed gave us. Because you never know when you might need some duct tape. There was a restaurant in this valley where we stopped for lunch. I was freaking out imagining how the ride down the hill was going to go. I noticed a van from the restaurant that some hikers were getting into because they were too tired to walk back to town. Perfect, I thought. They can put the bike in the back, my dad in the front, and we'll meet him back in town. Well, he was so angry with me for arranging this. I stood firm until I actually had to walk away because he was that mad. He finally conceded and went in the van, and the rest of us followed on our bikes. I'll never forget what he said when we met up again at the bike shop, and he was still mad. One of the few times in my life he was really angry with me. He said, "You screwed me out of the best bike ride of my life." He was so looking forward to riding down that hill with his childhood friend and his grandchildren in his hometown. And while he didn't hold a grudge, because he never did hold a grudge, he also never let this one go. I think he got a kick out of pushing my buttons when he brought it up over the years. He would say, "This is like that time you screwed me out of the best bike ride of my life." Or if I had been out biking, he would say, "Was it nice? Like that bike ride you screwed me out?" Well, 2.5 years ago, just before he had his fall, he came up with the idea that he should get an e-bike. You can imagine my reaction. But then he clarified he wanted to try to find an e-trike. And so we started looking. He took these kinds of purchases seriously. He did research, he enjoyed taking trips to look at things. And then he had that fall, and we really didn't think about it again until a year later. I found a bike shop in the small town of Linden on the way to Drumheller that said they had 2 we could try out. So Chris, Dad, and I piled into the van and headed out. And he was so happy. He sat in the front seat smiling and sharing stories, telling us about things we saw along the way, where the water in this or that creek originated, what crops were being grown and how. He just knew so much about so many different things. We arrived in Linden looking for the bike shop and were directed out into the country. And there was this Quonset hut in the middle of a farmer's field filled with bikes, thousands of bikes. And they had 2 e-trikes. So he test drove them around and around the farm and loved it. And because I'm a bit of a worrier, I was running behind him in case he tipped over, like he ran behind me when he taught me to ride a bike. Of course, you can't really fall over on a trike. And then he showed me. He hit the power on that trike, spun some gravel, and took off laughing. So I couldn't screw him out of another great bike ride. We went for lunch at a local restaurant to talk about these trikes, and he loved that too. Run by a Hutterite family, everything was made from scratch. He loved food, and he hated that his diabetes sometimes got in the way of